नारायण ओम नमो नारायण ओम नमो नारायण ओम नमो नारायण केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव माधव हरि माधव हरि माधव हरि माधव माधव हरि माधव हरि माधव हरि माधव गोविंद हरि गोविंद हरि गोविंद हरि गोविंद गोविंद हरि गोविंद हरि गोविंद हरि गोविंद ओम नमो नारायण 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 ओम नमो नारायण। ये श्री कृष्णचंद्र भगवान की जय, सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय। गोविंद 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 गिरधारी गोविंद 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 गिरधारी गोविंद 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 गिरधारी गोविंद 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 गिरधारी गोविंद गिरधारी गोवर्धन गिरधारी गोविंद गिरधारी गोवर्धन गिरधारी गोविंद गिरधारी गोवर्धन गिरधारी गोविंद गिरधारी गोवर्धन गिरधारी गोविंद 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 गिरधारी गोविंद 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 गिरधारी गोविंद गिरधारी गोवर्धन गिरधारी गोविंद गिरधारी गोवर्धन गिरधारी श्याम सुंदर मदन मोहन वृंदावन बिहारी 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 वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी श्याम सुंदर मदन मोहन वृंदावन बिहारी।
Hari Om everyone. Can you all see me and hear me clearly? Thank you. We'll start with the prayer and hopefully the prayers answer. Otherwise, I'll ask the questions. Both Hari and Divya, you can be answering it. And I'll give you the lead who will answer first and who will answer the next. And then we can cover this efficiently. So let's start with the prayer and let's begin. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Let me just add both of you as the spotlight. There you go. Hari Om Hari. Hari Om Divya. Long time no see. Hope you both are doing well. Good to see both of you. So we will have this question answers in a unique way where I'll ask the questions and then I'll ask it to one of you and then proceed to the other one. Okay. Divya. Are you ready?
Yes.
Cool. Meditation is the process by which we can make the understood truths our own, says Puja Gurudev in this particular chapter called Maya. What does this statement mean in your own words?
Okay. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay.
The first.
So in this phrase, when it says understood truth, means that Brahman as the infinite substratum is a matter of fact. And it's not some sort of religious belief or faith that is common in the Abrahamic context. So it's a matter of fact that Brahman is the infinite substratum, whether you believe it or not. The second phrase is make it your own. This indicates that although it is a fact, we're not able to recognize it as a subjective experience. So the process of meditation is removing all of our habitual erroneous identifications and coming to realize the truth that is already there. So this is my understanding of that phrase.
Okay, fair enough. Hari Garu. Hari. Same question. What is your...
So when it comes to this knowledge being uniform in what it says in our Shastra, the way you and I and the next person, how we verbalize it to ourselves will be different. Because we each have different pain points that we must work on, where this knowledge must come in to mitigate what our specific erroneous notions are. And they'll be different across the board. Now, even though the language is uniform in the Shastra, we respond to words in different ways. Therefore, we tell each other different things. Now, once this process is systematically taken up, Shravanam, to fully understand what is said in the Shastra, Mananam, to fill those logical gaps in myself so that I have that conviction that this is the truth. And finally, as Divyaji said, that Nididhyasanam, or what's referred to as meditation here, approaching that seat of meditation, where those viparita bhavanas, still those lingering erroneous notions that cloud my judgment, those are even taken away. So making these truths understood as my own means addressing my specific pain points, my specific erroneous notions, whether they are at this body level, mind level, intellectual level, and translating this knowledge into words that addresses those specific issues.
Can you give an example what these erroneous notions are?
So if one feeling that constantly comes up to me is, I am rejected. And this can stem from my ideas being rejected by a certain individual, by a populace, that I face that rejection at that point. If I truly understand this knowledge, that's a silly objection to come up with my own mind. Because first of all, where is this I to even be rejected? I'm identifying with this intellect that's the seat of decision making and clarity and lack of clarity, identifying with that so closely. That's why I feel so much pain when my ideas aren't taken into account. So addressing that specific instance by saying, I am not my ideas, I am not this equipment that has these ideas, going into those layers and distancing myself, that's me translating that knowledge into specific wording that hits at my erroneous notions.
Okay. How does one practice this?
One, first starting with that abhyasa, first even understanding, before then, understanding what my pain points even are. That where am I going wrong? What are these wrong notions that I'm harboring? From that step, what part of this knowledge mitigates that? Where have I understood this knowledge clearly? Because if I say I've understood this knowledge clearly, at the same time I'm having these issues of being attached to different equipments, then I haven't understood the knowledge. So repeating those parts of it to myself, and if necessary, understanding where that gap in that logic is, of what am I attaching myself to, really drilling into there, and that's that process.
Do you mean that it is an auto-suggestive process?
Not auto-suggestive per se, but still tailor-made, where having to understand where my personality is, what my hangups are, and then addressing that with the certain points that take care of it.
Can you take me through step by step as to how this is accomplished in real life practice?
Real life practice. So starting from, can I go back to the Shravanam level then and give an example going that way?
Yes, sure.
So in Shravanam then, there's that entire process where I go through to understand what is the Shastra even saying. So there's a whole process where there's a methodology, where what is repeated often in the Shastra, what is that point to be taken from any Upanishad? Secondly, what is the first part of that knowledge, that starting point, and what's the ending point? Do those agree with each other? Do I find that that's the same? What is it telling me about the fruit? What is the result of studying this knowledge? What is that? Do I understand what that is? Then what is that logical demonstration? What is the example that is used to prove that point? Do I understand that seamlessly with any kind of gap? If I do, Shravanam has been done properly. If there are any gaps in that understanding, then Shravanam has not been done properly. It must be done until it is sadhana, until it is perfect. Then that next step after that of manana, where say I have this idea taken up that I am not this body. And the first time we truly understand what's even said in Shastra, it's a big hit. Whether it's the students that are going through it, in the example we study in Shastra, or ourselves, to say that this assemblage has gotten me this far, this is what I know myself as, to see I'm not that, how can it say it? And then logical gaps there, going through the logic of, because it has a beginning and an end, therefore this body is not permanent, therefore I'm not this, convincing myself logically that way. But then when I interact in the world still, I can know this logically, I still give in to the body's demands, I still pamper this body ceaselessly. That means that despite going through this process of logical understanding, it still has not sunk in. So approaching that seat of meditation, then in many of our texts, even Atma Bodha, which is such a rudimentary text, there are certain meditation verses, shlokas that have words in them, asangaha, nishkriya, nirvikalpa, honing in on these words and seeing how does this word, the meaning of it, the implication of it, how does it address what I'm going through, what issue am I facing? And when that's dwelt upon, and I find that this word, this Lakshana Brahman, that identity, that which I am, it addresses that wrong notion that I have, thinking about it more and more, so much so that I understand my personality will have a difference in my understanding and my thinking because I've dwelt on it so much.
Last question on this whole. Just want to make it a very comprehensive discussion. You started off with Shravana as the first part of this equation. My question is there a necessity of preparation that is required even before Shravana?
If we look at what to do proper Shravanam then, at a very basic level, am I receptive to even hearing this knowledge? So at a very basic level, if I'm falling asleep when this knowledge is given, if I can't sit still either physically or mentally, that will lead to a fruitless progression. where I can be hearing this knowledge and everything, it won't make a dent because I'm not prepared as a sadhaka to listen to it. So those basic ideas of, do I have that sthira, that intention of sitting and listening to it with full attention? If that's not there, then Shravanam has no fruit. So I would say that is a preparatory step. That is the first step in preparation before Shravanam can even bear any fruit.
Are there any limbs to this? Sorry, I'm just pulling this question. Are there any preparatory limbs for that particular preparation?
Where we have that dispassion of vairagya, not running after everything and anything in the world. Because if I do that, there is no chance to actually engage in the Shravana. Then having that Shraddha, having that faith. Not faith is the wrong word. Sorry, that's a misuse of the word right there. What Shraddha translates to is, do I have that trust in what Shastra is saying and what my Guru is saying? Then that samadhan, that single pointedness, where distractions will abound. The mind doesn't like listening to what this knowledge is because it's making that mind more introverted. That's not the nature of my mind. So when that mind pushes back, can I quell what the mind is wanting to do? Do I stay directly here? These are some of those limbs that are those preparations to make sure Shravanam has its effect.
Okay. There's one more question, but I'll stop here because I've been asking monotonously a lot of questions on this one question and harping more subsets into it. So I think I'll stop there. It gives kind of a comprehensiveness. But I'll leave that question for people to think through. What will happen if that particular precursor, pre-qualifications are not available in a student? What will happen to the student? Will they be able to achieve this? Will they not be able to achieve this? Where will they, if at all, stop, or where will they reach? So this is something that one has to personalize and think through to find the perfect understanding of this meditation and experience of it. I'll stop there. Now that we have Hemant here, so let me pull him in. You both can. Thank you both. I'll call you for the next round wherever applicable. Hari Om, Hemant.
Hey,
How are you, man?
okay. How are you, Swamiji?
Na super hai, as always. So my question to you is, what is the purpose of studying this chapter called Maya?
Okay. Well, I think the fundamental answer that I will give is, it is important to know the difference between real and unreal, because I mean, we could probably be happy, living in an unreal, but ultimately the truth is what matters the most, and lies don't last for long. So I am not certain if there's anything more to the, I mean, there might be more to the answer than this, but I think this is the fundamental truth that I can think of, that it is important to distinguish real from unreal.
How does it help? Where does Maya fit into this?
Is we can never achieve true happiness in a Maya state.
Can you expound on that?
Well, Maya ultimately stands for what is temporary. I mean, it may look permanent, but ultimately it is not. And if we are all searching for the same goal, which is permanent happiness, we're not going to find that in anything that is connected to Maya.
Okay. Let me call upon Hari Chaitanya. Hari, what do you think about it?
Swamiji, this is a very personal part of it here that I identify with, especially about Maya. Reason being, when I was in college, first real serious look at Bhagavad Gita and what it says. Fortunately or unfortunately, one of the first commentaries in English I came across was one where this idea of Maya existing, or in delving into what Maya is, it was seen as a pejorative, where those who were Advaitins were called Mayavadis in this commentary when I was going through it. So I approached Swamiji. I distinctly remember approaching Swamiji and saying, this doesn't really align with what I've been taught in self-unfoldment in high school. What is this here? And of course, Swamiji's first recommendation was study Gurudev's works. Don't just read any commentary. You're not at the point where you can decipher what's right there, what's wrong there. Study Gurudev's works. And so this concept of Maya being misunderstood, it changes entire Siddhantas and Darshanas. And as Gurudev mentioned in the last part of this chapter, he goes through the main three darshanas within Vedanta. The understanding of Maya is a big role in which darshana do I take as legitimate one. So based on that, even I'd say to come to the truth comprehensively in a way that's fully understood. If this concept of Maya is not understood correctly, that can change my entire outlook, even within Vedanta, of what I believe is true, what I believe is the path as well.
So what is Maya then?
Maya is, at a very basic level, that Trigunatmika Maya, these sattva, rajas, tamas, that is its expression. And it is that which is, Ishvara wields this Maya, and without the Maya, Brahman cannot express. Because Brahman is asanga, it has no attachment to anything, no way of expressing without this upadhi, therefore Maya must exist. At the same time, though, we say Maya does not exist, because that which is existent is something that must be permanent. Sat is that only existence, and there's no other existence, so Maya cannot be permanent either in existence. So those are the nuances to it. And if we say that there is no such thing as Maya, Brahman expressing is not possible. If we say that Maya is permanent, then there is no mukti, and that's liberation for us. So
you used twice so far saying Brahman expresses. Does Brahman really express?
Brahman does not express, but for there to be that chit in this jiva even, that can be said as expression of that Brahman.
Do we recognize it with any other name? Ishvara.
Ishvara, yes. Ishvara as well.
Sometimes the simplest of the things we just.
I was overthinking that. So, yeah.
I could see that processing happening. I was like, why is he processing it so much?
Over smartness, that's not there. That's what this is.
Okay, let me ask. Let me pull in Divya.
Okay. So if we start with the Shastra's fundamental statement that we are essentially divine in nature and that we have never lost our divinity. Achyuta is the word that, Achyuta is the term used. So that is the pramana from our Shastras. But in terms of our experience, we don't recognize it. We see our ego, our individuality as limited. We see not oneness, but a lot of plurality. There's limitations in time and space. So my experience does not match up to what the Shastras are saying as pramana. So in order to explain this difference, this gap between the pramana and my experience, the solution or explanation that's given is the concept of Maya. That then how do we understand the world around us from the perspective of a sadhaka and from Vedanta? So that is when we go into the explanation that Brahman is the substratum and that Maya is an inherent Shakti of Brahman, which is the reason why that expression of that oneness, that infiniteness looks as plurality in front of us. And where does that concept of jiva and ego come about, it lays out that relationship between, or explains that difference between the pramana of the shastras and my experience. And what's important is whenever we look at something like, oh, why isn't science good enough to explain the world around us? This fundamental premise that we are divine in our essence and in our nature is completely missing. They're just continuing to analyze the world in taking it to be that reality. So Maya is only explained to understand the difference between the pramana and the shastras and our experience. Otherwise, it's not worth studying. Otherwise, we'll get lost in the infinite expressions of Maya.
Okay. Let me thank you, Hemant. Let me ask another serious discussion with the two of you. Explain the relationship between Ishvara and Maya. Divya.
So again, Maya is an inseparable aspect of Brahman. So for the example that was given is that Maya is kind of like our inherent skill set or talent. The example that Swamiji had given was my ability to speak. I can express myself through the ability of speech, and I can withdraw it as well. But my existence doesn't depend on that expression of that ability. So Brahman, with its expression of Maya, is then considered as Ishvara. And when it is identified with different Shaktis, he takes on different formats. So we saw, when he takes on the Shakti of creation, he becomes the creator, which requires knowledge. In maintenance, he takes on the form of Bhagavan Vishnu as Ishvara, and then requires Mahalakshmi as the resources, and so on and so forth. So this is the relationship between Maya and Ishvara, that the substratum is Brahman, the inherent ability is Maya, and when Brahman is identified with that particular Shakti, he is now considered as Ishvara.
Okay. Hari.
If we start the fact that Ishvara is the wielder of Maya, we see why does that have to be so? If Ishvara is said as Sarveshaktiman, that one who is all-powerful, that must be the case because Ishvara is Karma Paladata. Therefore, it must be all-knowing, knowing of everything, Sarvagnya. Sarveshaktiman, able to give those Karma Palas, all of this. That's only possible if that Ishvara is in control of the Gunatmika Maya, where there's nothing left unaccounted for. So that relationship is one where, like it was said before, even for that Ishvara to express Maya is necessary, but it's not that Ishvara is under the ambit of that Maya. Ishvara controls that Maya. And that's the reason why all the lakshanas that we find of Ishvara are possible, only because he is the wielder of them.
Why can't Ishvara be that Shakti? Why should he be the Shaktiman?
Because how, if Ishvara is that Shakti, then how would it express? If someone has to wield that Shakti and use it as an instrument, if they are that Shakti themselves, would that even be possible? That using it as an instrument.
The idea would be that if Ishvara itself is Shakti, which is what many of us Hindu who very immediately jump and say, oh, I may not believe in a particular form of God, but I believe in God as supreme energy. Now, the flaw in that particular argument is that if you take Ishvara to be that energy or Ishvara to be that Shakti, what is that Shakti as we know of? Shakti is a subtle expression of matter. Matter in a different format is Shakti, which in layman's terms may not be that layman, but in common parlance, E equals mc square. So energy is mass, and we see that energy, when mass is morphed, when it is put under certain circumstances, it produces immense amount of energy. So the morphing of mass is where we find energy. The nature of matter is that it is jada. The nature of matter is that it is a chaitanya swarupa, that there is no chaitanyatmak. So when we say Ishvara is Shakti, we are saying that Ishvara is jada. Right? And jada cannot be the platform from where Chaitanya Tattva can emerge. But we can say very clearly that Ishvara is the beholder of this Maya Shakti, that holding which, when intelligently channelized, there is this productive output called Jagat, that is seen, experienced, and withdrawn as per the case. But if it is the very nature of that Ishvara, which is Shakti, rather than being a Shaktiman, the wielder of Shakti, then first it is Jada, and then the connection between that Ishvara as Shakti and that Paramatma Swarupa, the Shuddha Chaitanya, there is a disconnect. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions on that? Does it follow through logically in grasping it? Yeah. That's a very important part of this discussion of Maya and Ishvara. Okay, you both can withdraw from the spotlight. Let me put back Hemant. Hemant, ready for one more?
Sure.
Cool. Okay, there's this. We can remove the I don't know obstacle by listening, either directly to a spiritual guru or indirectly through the scriptures. What are the markers to know that I fully know? I know that I know. How do I know?
Okay. Well, I do remember this one passage in that says, if you think you know, then you don't actually know, because this knowledge, the supreme knowledge, is not, it's beyond the BMI. So I guess the simplest way to put it is, you don't really think of it intellectually, like you just are, I mean, it's kind of like this whole idea that you don't have to have someone tell you what your name is. You don't have to have someone tell you that you're human. You just, instinctively know. I guess this kind of fits that way, but you cannot think of it intellectually that, I think that I am, because that's limiting it.
So let me bring in Hari Chaitanya here. Hari, do you find anything objectionable here? And add more clarity to it.
Just the idea, I don't think it's a Vedantic concept where it's, if I think I know, I really don't know. That may be at some level in a different context, but I wouldn't necessarily take that here. But what I would build on for this question here, that what are the markers to know that I fully know, is that it's said in Bhagavad Gita, for one who is ignorant, the Ajnani, a telltale sign is they have kama, desire, to achieve something, desire at the body level, desire to even understand something they don't understand, like that frustration that comes with it. Those are all lakshanas of the ajnani. And when we look at that of the jnani, merely not having desire, though, is not a lakshana of a jnani, of a learned person, of the one who is realized. Merely not having desire is not a lakshana, just by saying I don't have any desire. But that calmness of mind that comes from understanding that which is to be known has been known. That is that marker of someone who has realized this truth. As well as when it comes to identification, then, does that person still act like a normal person for vyavahara, for the purposes of maintaining the body to a certain extent, for interactions according to social norms? Yes, all of that will be there. But how far ingratiated are they with all these interactions? How much baggage do they still hold? When I find myself having that baggage from interactions, when I find myself having desires for certain things, that's a telltale sign that I don't fully know. And even the question that's put here, how do I fully know, that's even adulterated. It's either I know or I don't know. There's no halfway or full. So putting it that way also, I now see that is a mistake to put it that way, but it's either I know or I don't know.
See, there is one reference that Hemant brought in, which was from Kenopanishad. Yaha manyate suvedeti, nona vedeti vedacha. This comes in Kenopanishad. How do you connect that? This question is to Hari. How do you connect that with what we are discussing?
That there's a difference between samanya jnana and vishesha jnana. That knowledge of everyday things, of certain subjects, everything in this empirical world, that's purely based on pratyaksha pramana. That which is observed with the five senses. That which I can measure, quantify. This knowledge here is completely beyond that. It has no relevance to what I ascertain with my five senses. And so one hang-up that I can often come to, and this is a philosophical hang-up as well throughout history, is if I don't see it, I don't believe it. Seeing is believing. But here, that's the wrong concept entirely. So knowing that which is the light, that which is the chit that empowers me to know anything at all, that would be that source. That is what to know. That is what to know as my true identity. So with regards to this question and that beautiful question brought up from Kenopanishad, that's the connection I would make there.
So going back to the Kenopanishad, when they say, if you say that you know, you don't know, but if you, what do they mean by it?
That what is this entity that is saying that I know? Is it this assemblage that says, I know this, I know the truth, I know what I am? Or is it operating from that standpoint where this truth, this ultimate reality, that is my identity? Where if I'm saying it from the standpoint of, I know as this intellect, and this intellect is what is the knower of all, then that would be erroneous there.
So the point of clarity that has to be gathered in that particular Upanishadic statement is there is subjective jnana and there is an objective jnana. When we usually say that I know, it is purely at an objective level. Like I know a pen, right? So pen is the thing that I am perceiving, seen. So the eye see it, the mind processes it, the intellect gathers it, and then finally there is a recognition. There is saying that I know this. Almost 99.99% of our experience, we go by this one experience, that this is how I know things. We tend to apply the same thing in this spiritual path of understanding. And that is where we fall flat on our face. Because it is not the same intellectualization. Because the moment you intellectualize it and say that The intellectualized aspect is the jnana or my nature, and that intellect is a very flimsy pattern because it exists, it vanishes, it can resurface. Atma Jnana or Atma Chaitanya is not something that vanishes ever. That which is always there is Atma Jnana. Sat meaning that which exists, always, ever existing, never ceasing to be non-existent. So that is not an option. Whereas the buddhi, like in deep sleep state, it is non-functional. Whereas in the waking state, we see it function. It is withdrawn. The buddhi is withdrawn in the deep sleep state. So this subjective knowledge cannot be the one which we say is buddhijanya, that which is born out of the buddhi. It is independent of it. That which illumines even the buddhi is called the Atma Chaitanya or Atma Jyoti. So the way I usually conclude is, when a concept is being said, there is this aspect which tells me clearly, I understand, I've grasped it. Then something also says very clearly that I do not understand. There is something in under whose light, whose illumination, I can clearly grasp that I understand. I can clearly also grasp that I do not understand. That which is illumining these two aspects of buddhi is called Atma Chaitanya, which is not the subject of grasp of buddhi. Therefore, in Upanishad, they say, Nona Vedeti Vedacha. If I say I know as the buddhi's purview, then I definitely do not know. As a subjective experience, then definitely. But then you don't need to be jumping and talking about it because you're already there. Does that clarify the connection, Hemant? Good. So, should I go for another question? There's one concept that I do want to talk or ask about, which is a very important aspect, I think. So let me ask Divya. Let me call her in. Hemant, I'm going to take you out. Okay, Divya. What is this concept of microcosmic and macrocosmic level? And where does Maya get applied?
So when we speak about the microscopic level, we're speaking about the individual themselves, the ego, the jiva. Macrocosmic level means from the samashti level, the totality, whether it's the universe itself, the total subtle mind. So from that total level is considered as macrocosmic. So when we say that Shakti expresses itself at the macrocosmic level, it is termed as Maya. So the definition here is Trigunatmika. So the entire totality begins with the sattva, rajas, and tamas, both in the subtle form, and subsequently goes through its process into rajas and tamas. And so the entire world is nothing but the expression of the divine. Whereas in the microcosmic level, this Shakti expresses itself as avidya, which takes the form of ignorance of my own true nature through avarna and vikshepa. So avarna and vikshepa are, as Gurudev translates it as, non-apprehension and misapprehension. So misapprehension is, first, non-apprehension is not recognizing myself, And because of that ignorance, there is a projection of plurality that happens. And that takes on the expression of me and mine, yours and you and yours. So the important distinction here between the two is that when the Shakti is expressed as Maya at the macrocosmic level, Ishvara is in complete control. It recognizes, it's not under that ignorance. It doesn't lose its understanding of what it originally is. Whereas at a microcosmic level, we call it as avidya because we're subjected to that ignorance and we completely forget our true nature. Therefore, Ishvara is known as Maya Pati, whereas at the microscopic level, it's Maya Dasa. So that's the difference between the two levels.
Hari, do you want to add anything to it?
Unless there's a pointed question about part of it, Swamiji, I don't have anything to add on that.
Okay, then the pointed question that I would have is, where does there are two sets of questions. The first set of question is the sattvic, rajasic, tamasic aspect. Where does that fall in this logic?
Where, when it comes to the relation or the differentiation between this jiva and that Ishvara, that as a jiva, my level of sattva is very much muddled with rajas and tamas. It's that madhina sattva, that it's not purity, that must be cultivated. For Ishvara, the pradhana of Ishvara is that vishuddha sattva, the highest of that sattva. Therefore, there is, without much of that tamas or that rajas expressing there's an ability to wield that maya and have it under control. Here, though, that avarana vikshepa expresses itself as that avarana is tamas, vikshepa is that rajas, and that's what's overpowering. That is what has to be snapped.
So the next confusion comes that we say Maya is at the samashti level and avidya is at the vyashti level. But we see that sattvic, rajasic, tamasic is at both levels. How do we justify that?
That even though it's micro and macro, we still see the gunas operating. Could we say that? Is it too simple of an answer to say, since Maya is expressing as these three gunas, it must express this way? There is no choice but to have those gunas being present.
A simpler thing would be that when we say that when we are discussing at the macro and micro, samashti and vyashti, we say Maya and avidya. When we are talking about the other aspect, which is the sattvic, rajasic, tamasic, then we are not taking the earlier logic of one being at the samashti and one being at the vyashti. That is only applicable at that level of logic. And here in this definition, we do not overdraw that into this example. So that is one simple way of looking at it. Now, the second set of questions that I have is, there is also the definition of Maya as the Ichha Jnana Kriya Shakti, right? So how do we do the samanvaya of this into the understanding of Maya Shakti? Hari.
Is it that whether it's Ichha, Kriya, Jnana, Shakti, all of that is only possible within that realm of Maya? Because if there is something to be accomplished, some action that is born of some desire, that is only because there's a preponderance of a certain guna in the mind that expresses and which is used, and therefore that action comes out of that eventually. It is only because that Maya is present that first of all, the power to do it is even there. Even those gunas expressing that take me to that point, it is only because of that Maya.
So there is no Vyashti Samashti Bhava of that, of Ichha Jnana Kriya Shakti. Meaning, does the microcosm, the individuality at the Vyashti level, is there Ichha Jnana Kriya Shakti?
At the Vyashti level, there is.
So it is there both at the Vyashti and at the Samashti level. Affirmative? Yes, no, all right.
As a collective having one common Ichha, that's where it's leading to in my head. That's why I'm hesitant on it.
Say that again.
As a collective having a common Ichha, common Kriya, that's where it's leading to in my head. That's why I'm hesitant to affirm.
But at the individual level, is there Ichha Shakti? Do we have, right? That is called the Kama Vasana.
Yes.
Ichha Shakti. Do we have Jnana Shakti?
Yes.
Without which there is no Vyavahara Jnana and there is no Atma Jnana either. Do we have Kriya Shakti?
Yes.
We have terrific itch of the field of action. So it is there both at the Vyashti level as well as at the Samashti level. That's why I keep saying that in the Samashti level, the sequence of order is there is Ichha Shakti, then there is Jnana Shakti, then there is Kriya Shakti. Whereas most of the jivas, or almost all of us, it is first there is Ichha Shakti, then we jump in and we get the knowledge and wisdom later. The Jnana happens later. So there is a sequential disorder at the Vyashti level. But it does express and it does have both the Trigunatmika and the Trishakti Swarupa, both of them express at both levels. It is only the definition to make it further clear that there is the avidya aspect and there is the Maya aspect that is applicable only at two distinct levels. One is at the Samashti level, the other is at the Vyashti level. Therefore, we indulge more in that discussion than the other two aspects of discussion to make the difference. Because mostly we don't talk about it, we don't mention this. So I thought that discussion can clarify it and nail it down for good. I think I'll stop it here. I'll invite Hemant. Can you, he's like, another question? Oh my goodness. No, it's not question. I am inviting you for the Hanuman Chalisa. So can you sing it in a new tune?
Sure. Shri Guru Charana Saroja Raja Nijamana Mukura Sudari Varano Raghuvar Bimala Jasu Jodhayak Falachari Buddhihina Tanu Janike Sumiro Pavana Kumar Palabudhi Vidya Dehu Mohi Arahu Kalesa Vigar Jaya Hanuman Jnana Guna Sagar Jaya Kapishati Huloka Hujagar Ramaduta Tulita Baladhama Anjani Putra Pavana Sutanama Mahavira Vikrama Pajarangi Kumati Nivara Sumati Kesangi Kanjana Varana Viraja Suvesa Kanana Kundala Kunchita Kesa हाथ वज्र हो ध्वजा विराजे कांधे मूंज जनेयु साजे शंकर सुवन केसरी नंदन तेज प्रताप महाजगवंदन विद्यावान गुणी अति चातुर, राम काज करिबे को आतुर। प्रभु चरित्र सुनिबे को रसिया, राम लखन सीता मन बसिया। सूक्ष्म रूप धरि सियहि दिखावा, विकट रूप धरि लंक जरावा। भीम रूप धरि असुर संहारे, रामचंद्र के काज सवारे। लाय सजीवन लखन जियाए, श्री रघुवीर हर्षि उर लाए। रघुपति कीन्ही बहुत बड़ाई, तुम मम प्रिय भरतहि सम भाई। सहस बदन तुम रोजस गावे, अस कहि श्रीपति कंठ लगावे। सनकादिक ब्रह्मादि मुनीसा, नारद सारद सहित अहिसा। यम कुबेर दिक्पाल जहाते, कवि कोविद कहि सके कहाते। तुम उपकार सुग्रीवहि कीना, राम मिलाय राजपद दीना। तुमरो मंत्र विभीषण माना, लंकेश्वर भय सब जग जाना। युग सहस्र जो जन पर भानु, लील्योताहि मधुर फल जानु। प्रभु मुद्रिका मेलि मुख माहि, चल दिलांगी गए अचरज नाही। दुर्गम काज जगत के जेते, सुगम अनुग्रह तुमरे तेते। राम दुआरे तुम रखवारे, हो धन आज्ञा बिनु पैसारे। सब सुख लहे तुम्हारी शरणा, तुम रक्षक काहू को डरना। आपन तेज सवारो आपे, तीनों लोक हाकते कांपे। भूत पिशाच निकट नहीं आवे, महावीर जब नाम सुनावे। नासे रोग हरे सब पीरा, जपत निरंतर हनुमत बीरा। संकट से हनुमान छुड़ावे, मन क्रम बचन ध्यान जो लावे। सब पर राम तपस्वी राजा, तिनके काज सकल तुम साजा। और मनोरथ जो कोई लावे, सोई अमित जीवन फल पावे। चारों युग परताप तुम्हारा, है प्रसिद्ध जगत उजियारा। साधु संत के तुम रखवारे, असुर निकंदन राम दुलारे। अष्ट सिद्धि नव निधि के दाता, असवर दीन जानकी माता। राम रसायन तुम्हारे पासा, सदा रहो रघुपति के दासा। तुम्हारे भजन राम को भावे, जन्म जन्म के दुख बिसरावे। अंत काल रघुवर पुर जाई, जहाँ जन्म हरि भक्त कहाई। और देवता चित्तन धरई, हनुमत से ही सर्व सुख करई। संकट कटे मिटे सब पीरा, जो सुमिरै हनुमत बलवीरा। जय 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 हनुमान गोसाई, कृपा करो गुरुदेव की नाई। जो शत बार पाठ कर कोई, छूट ही बंधि महासुख होई। जो यह पढ़े हनुमान चालीसा, होई सिद्धि साखी गौरीसा। तुलसीदास सदा हरि चेरा, की जय नाथ हृदय मह डेरा। की जय नाथ हृदय मह डेरा। पवन तनय संकट हरण, मंगल मूर्ति रूप। राम लखन सीता सहित, हृदय बसहु सुर भूप। श्यावर रामचंद्र की जय, पवन सुत हनुमान की जय। उमापति महादेव की जय, बोलो भाई सब संतन की जय।
श्री सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय. Let us conclude. ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्. असतो मा सद्गमय, तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय, मृत्योर्मा अमृतङ्गमय. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Just before we wind off, just wanted to introduce to all of you something that we had a Mahasamadhi camp recently, a very beautiful one. Pujya Swami Swarupananji was here. So on the very first day when he was here, there was this, I would say it was an inspired work, because that is how I feel it when I look at it. There was this inspired work on Ramayana, where Ramayana through a simplistic calligraphic ink art was produced, and it came in the shape of this beautiful book. Okay, you can see it covers half of my entire frame. So it's in a coffee table format. So this book Ramayana has been published. So if anybody wants to check it out, buy it and things like that. So you can see that the whole Ramayana, there is the sketches, and there is Goswami Tulsidas ji's explanations that are given. I can go one by one. There are about 60 frames to look at, and this is Rama Pattabhisheka, Rama Kalyana. So if you want to own this and welcome Bhagwan Sri Ramchandra ji through this calligraphic ink art, ping me or send an email to the CMDFW board, and we should be able to organize something. Meanwhile, there is a website where a direct link and you can procure. Through that link will also be posted in a day or two. So until then, you can send me a direct message and we will make sure that this book reaches you. Just wanted to announce and put it out there. Thank you. I'll stop now. Take care. See you all next week with a new chapter. Hari Om.